Hello all, and welcome to week 41 of the Religious Education Initiative. We're going to continue now as we move into the summer. We're actually going to read a different book in the Bible, one of the books from the so-called Apocrypha. These are books we don't read aloud in the church, and they aren't included in many English language Bibles. However, they have always been understood to be part of the Old Testament in the Orthodox Church. The book of Tobit, which we'll be reading, lets us see what happens to a family that is faithful to God in the northern nation of Israel, even after the sins of the kings and the majority of the people result in God giving them over into the hands of the Assyrian Empire. The nation of Israel is gone, or almost gone, as we begin the book of Tobit, but God is still faithful to those who hold fast to him. So this is Tobit chapter 1. The book of the Acts of Tobit, the son of Tobiel, son of Ananiel, son of Aduel, son of Gabael, of the descendants of Asiel and the tribe of Naphtali, who in the days of Shalmaneser, king of the Assyrians, was taken into captivity from Thisbe, which is in the south of Kedesh Naphtali, in Galilee above Asher. I, Tobit, walked in the ways of truth and righteousness all the days of my life, and I performed many acts of charity to my brethren and my countrymen who went with me into the land of the Assyrians to Nineveh. Now, when I was in my own country, in the land of Israel, when I was still a young man, the whole tribe of Naphtali, my forefather, deserted the house of Jerusalem. This was the place which had been chosen from among all the tribes of Israel, where all the tribes should sacrifice, and where the temple of the dwelling of the Most High was consecrated and established for all generations forever. All the tribes that joined in apostasy used to sacrifice to the calf Baal, and so did the house of Naphtali my forefather. But I alone went often to Jerusalem for the feasts, as it is ordained for all Israel by an everlasting decree. Taking the first fruits and the tithes of my produce and the first shearings, I would give these to the priests, the sons of Aaron, at the altar. Of all my produce I would give a tenth to the sons of Levi who ministered at Jerusalem. A second tenth I would sell, and I would go and spend the proceeds each year at Jerusalem. The third tenth I would give to those to whom it was my duty, as Deborah my father's mother had commanded me, for I was left an orphan by my father. When I became a man, I married Anna, a member of our family, and by her I became the father of Tobias. Now, when I was carried away captive to Nineveh, all my brethren and my relatives ate the food of the Gentiles, but I kept myself from eating it, because I remembered God with all my heart. Then the Most High gave me favor and good appearance in the sight of Shalmaneser, and I was his buyer of provisions. So I used to go into Media, and once at Rages in Media I left 10 talents of silver in trust with Gabael, the brother of Gabrias. But when Shalmaneser died, Sennacherib his son reigned in his place, and under him the highways were unsafe, so that I could no longer go into Media. In the days of Shalmaneser I performed many acts of charity to my brethren. I would give my bread to the hungry, and my clothing to the naked, and if I saw any one of my people dead and thrown out behind the wall of Nineveh, I would bury him. And if Sennacherib the king put to death any who came fleeing from Judea, I buried them secretly. For in his anger he put many to death. When the bodies were sought by the king, they were not found. Then one of the men of Nineveh went and informed the king about me, that I was burying them. So I hid myself. When I learned that I was being searched for to be put to death, I left home in fear. Then all my property was confiscated, and nothing was left to me except my wife Anna and my son Tobias. But not 50 days passed before 2 of Sennacherib's sons killed him, and they fled to the mountains of Ararat. Then Esarhaddon his son reigned in his place, and he appointed Ahikar the son of my brother Anael over all the accounts of his kingdom, and over the entire administration. Ahikar interceded for me, and I returned to Nineveh. Now Ahikar was cupbearer, keeper of the signet, and in charge of administration of the accounts, for Esarhaddon had appointed him second to himself. He was my nephew. So, this is really, we're skipping ahead in the story, but this continues the story of the nation of Israel that we saw with Elijah. Elijah was sent as a prophet to Ahab when the Israelites, the nation of Israel, was beginning their hard turn into idolatry, into the worship of other gods, of Baal and Asherah, the gods of the Phoenicians, of Tyre and Sidon, gods that they worshipped with the sacrifice of children, gods that they worshipped with unspeakable sexual immorality. So Elijah spoke against them, we remember, and for his troubles, Jezebel tried to kill him. And we remember he was despairing, he was depressed, he didn't understand why it was so hard. And he asked God, what gives? I've been faithful, why isn't it working? And God told him, yes, you've been faithful. This is a longer process. And he told Elijah to trust him, and that there were many, he said, at least 7,000 in Israel, who had not bent the knee to Baal, who were still faithful to Yahweh. So this is what we saw already, and now we see even, decades, even more than a century later, when the sins of Ahab are really coming home to roost, and the people are being brought into captivity. Even then, there are still some who are faithful. This Tobit here, he's faithful to Yahweh, and even after he doesn't escape the punishments. He doesn't escape the consequences of the sins of his people, but he still remains faithful to God. So what we see is a few things that are really important. How does Tobit stay faithful to God when everyone else goes off into idolatry? First, he doesn't worship the calf Baal. He doesn't worship the idols. He doesn't participate in this worship. Instead, he's still going to Jerusalem. He's giving of his property, of the produce of his fields. In fact, he's giving 3/10 of everything that he has, according to the law. The first tenth he is giving as the offering. The second tenth he's giving. So the first tenth he's giving, in sacrifice, and then to support the priests, what remains. The second tenth he's selling, and he's spending the money in Jerusalem, so he's celebrating the feasts. This is part of the law, that we celebrate the festivals of God. And the third tenth he's giving to the poor, to the needy, to those that are close to him, that he's responsible for. So he's giving generously, and he's obeying the law. This is what he does even before the nation of Israel is led in captivity. Once he's in captivity, he's brought to Nineveh, which is the capital city of Assyria, and even there, he's still, he finds favor with the king. He's able to go and he's making a living, and he's even making enough that he can put some money aside. That's going to be important for the future. But he's taking, from his property, and he's caring for the poor, especially the poor of the nation of Israel. Even though, he says, all of my brothers, all of my relatives, all of the nation of Israel who were brought into captivity, they all fell into idolatry. They all ate the bread, ate the meat, we should rather say, the meat sacrificed to idols. They participated in the worship of the pagan gods of Assyria. He says, but I didn't. I kept myself apart from this. But he's still caring for the poor. And more than that, and this is where he gets into trouble, when the Assyrian king, especially this new king, Sennacherib, when he's killing the people of God, when he's killing the Jews, and he's executing them, and he's throwing their bodies out, to be mocked and dishonored. But Tobit is going and burying them. So he's still doing the right thing, even at the cost of his own, at the risk of his own life and his own wealth, and indeed it does cost all of his property, and he has to run away in order to not be killed. So this is what we see of him. And Sennacherib doesn't live forever. In fact, he doesn't live very long at all. Tobit is only off in hiding for 50 days before Sennacherib's sons kill him, and then Tobit's able to come back because his cousin, rather his nephew, is appointed as a high court official by the next king of Assyria, and he intercedes for his uncle so that Tobit can come back. So what we see here is, a man who's doing the right thing, even when he's suffering for the sins of others, and he's still remaining faithful. It's hard, he's struggling, but he's still faithful. This is what God promised to Elijah, that there were others besides him who were still faithful, who had not bent the knee to Baal. So we're going to see moving forward in the coming weeks what happens to Tobit and his family. But for now, it's good to see what it looks like to be faithful. So God bless you all. I will see you for the day 2 readings shortly.